I'm Matt.
And I'm Chris.
We're best friends.
And brothers in the fire service. And this is the 360 Podcast. Welcome to 360 Podcast. As always, I'm with my buddy Matt. I'm Chris. We have two special guests today. We have Deputy Chief Nick Ells and Fire Captain Johnny Padilla and Local 3573 Union President, El Presidente. Welcome to the show, gentlemen. We're happy to have you guys.
Thank you.
Today is actually a real important, real special episode. We're discussing fire districts, financial crunches, financial issues. And these two gentlemen are here to talk about how we're going to take steps in the future to fix that. So, gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thank you very much. We hear you guys are huge fans.
Yeah, yeah.
We're huge fans too. Love spending time with you guys. Love seeing you. Matt's probably, he's too shy. He's going to ask for the autographs.
Before we leave.
So, gentlemen, please feel free. Thank you for taking time out of your day. What do you see the future of fire districts looking like?
The future of fire districts, I think when we look at fire districts as a whole and you look at them compared to municipalities, people look at cities as being able to have everything, right?
Okay.
But we look at fire districts as we don't have possibly everything the city does. But when you look at the services that we provide as a district, we're providing the exact same service, if not even more. And we're doing it fiducially or financially responsibly in a far more responsible way. Unfortunately, there's some things that I think Captain Padilla is going to address them today with Prop 117 that's really limited our abilities as fire districts when we talk about funding, right?
Okay.
We have things that have happened in the past, legislation that's passed that's limited that, but we've still found a way because our people understand that while operating in a fire district, you have to operate financially responsible. Every decision we make is based on, number one, providing care to our communities that we're sworn to protect, but number two, doing it in the most responsible way possible where there is no wasteful spending. There is nothing like that. And we've come to a crossroads, I think, that we're going to talk about today where we have to take action as fire districts to make that difference, to keep delivering the high level of service to our communities.
Absolutely. So can we educate the community and the public about the difference, how funding is put out for municipality as opposed to a district? I mean, municipalities go to city managers with a budget, correct? And
Correct.
Say, hey, this next fiscal year, I need $100 million, right?
Yeah. So before we hit on that, though, I want to kind of go back to your last question about the future of fire districts. And I think what we need to realize is how fire districts have evolved over the years. 20 years ago, fire districts were considered just majority of them just little pop-up volunteer mom and pop style services that provided mostly just suppression services, and some of them provided EMS, right? But the reality is the state of Arizona, at the rate it's growing, it's just growing so fast. And a lot of the people that are moving in to the state are moving into rural areas. So that's truly because of the growth has changed the dynamics of how fire districts provide service. So these fire districts now, as you see, like Northwest Fire District, right? They've grown to a huge size. AFMA, the authority we created, has grown to a huge size. And we've grown not just because we want to grow, it's because of the need, because of the people that have moved in, which has created, as Chief stated, a huge financial hurdle. The hurdle is that a lot of these people that move in from out of state or from other areas, municipalities, they expect a certain level of service. And in order for a fire district to do so, we need the funding, right? And then Prop 117, which is the big one that we like to talk about, that created just a huge shortfall. It limited on how fast we can create the funding revenue. And then we'll also like to talk about when we get further into it, like you stated about the taxes and how municipalities get revenue, how fire districts have been overlooked in getting their equal share to provide the same services to these rural areas. That if you look at now, some of the rural areas, they're the size of small towns.
Yeah,
they're the size
absolutely.
They're the size of small cities, but they're not incorporated. So therefore, they rely on fire districts who set up to provide those services.
And I think there's a lot of people that don't know that they're in a fire district, right? Or necessarily. And I think on the one hand, that's great because we have not lowered our standards. We're providing a great service. We give them everything that we can. And so they move in and don't understand the funding differences and the mechanisms we use to build our budget. And like you said, 20 years ago, when you thought fire district, you thought way outskirts, super rural area. And now they're just unincorporated parts of the city that, like, hey, you're in this subdivision and this subdivision is County Island and not part of the city, and you're a fire district. And 10 streets over, that subdivision is the city. And they bought that house and had no idea. And the service they get is seamless because of automatic aid. And it's a great system, but it can be like from the outside looking in, a confusing system to people.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's very confusing, especially when you get down at the legislative level. So at the legislative level here in the state, the majority of our people that are voted in down there, they reside in Maricopa County. So when you go and speak to them in regards to fire district funding, most of them are not aware that fire districts even exist. Like they don't exist. They believe everyone is serviced by a municipal service. And so which ended up being one of the big issues in Prop 310 that we try to pass. It's just the lack of education on truly what fire districts provide.
Yeah. And that's what we're here today to accomplish, is to educate the community, the public, so they understand we're providing that service for the community. We do a great job providing that service, but at the end of the day, what does that take? That takes money.
Yeah.
Right? In reality, it is like a business.
Yes.
So how can we fix that? What can we do?
There's things that we're doing specifically at AFMA, I think that are really accomplishing two goals, right? The first goal is we want to provide a higher level of service to our community, the highest that we can. But number two, we want to be able to build alternate revenue sources to that service that we're building, right? Some of the things that, especially us at AFMA, and I like to say for AFMA, and it really affects all districts, but I believe that AFMA is really the leader in districts when it comes to these kind of things. But the alternate revenue sources, most of your fire districts rely on that ambulance revenue as part of their general fund. This is a huge part of your operating fund that you go by. When you look at a municipality, those ambulance revenues are either operated by an enterprise fund, which just supports the ambulance, or it just goes back into the general fund. You know, it's not really that big of a deal kind of thing. For us, it's huge. In all fire districts, it's huge. It provides a huge source of our general revenue and operating budget. But here at AFMA specifically, one of the things that we're trying to do is really look at outside of what has been the norm and what can we do to improve that. And like one of the things that we're doing coming up is the state this last year passed a critical care paramedic certification that we can now start bringing that level of care, the critical care paramedic, to our community members, right? Not only that, but it also doubles as a higher revenue source because we can charge 18% higher to our insurance companies and Medicaid and Medicare for delivering that service. So it actually is twofold. We can train our members to the highest level of care. We can provide a higher level of care to the communities that we serve. And we're also building a higher revenue stream. You know, that's one of the great things that I think that we're coming up with. Here in this next year, we're going to be sending a lot of our membership through critical care paramedic school. We're going to be providing that care both for 911 and interfacility. And there's not a municipality in the valley or even the state that I understand right now that's providing critical care in the 911 setting. You know, there is some that provide it in the interfacility transport setting. but we're looking at doing it both. So we're really trying to break the mold on this. And that's one of the things that I think we can look at through the state. But these are small gap things that we're doing.
Absolutely.
These aren't fixes. These are things that we're still going to have to bear the cost up front to train the personnel to get the equipment and provide that higher level of service. Whereas legislatively, we've got to find a fix that helps everybody.
Sure.
Right. And I think that
And providing those services again costs money.
Yeah.
Yep.
So if I may, to educate the public, how do districts get funding?
So let me hit on Prop 117 real quick,
Sure.
and then I'll go right into how they get the funding. So I think one of the biggest talking points you guys will hear, especially down at the state level for labor for PFFA, and then we'll also hear from our fire board members and fire chiefs when they go and speak. We always talk about Prop 117, right? How it affected the fire district's funding system. It put a 5% cap of growth rate on what we can collect in revenue. So and there's some additional nuances in regards to new home builds and so forth that play into it. But to keep it at a simple level, you just can't grow more than 5% of your budget each year. And as we know, the growth rate in our areas exceeds that, right?
Sure.
It normally exceeds that. Some of the background though on Prop 117, which I think people need to understand as well, is this was kind of an initiative that was really funded and brought forward by the Arizona Tax Research Association, which is ATRA, right? ATRA is comprised of mostly members that have high value assets and properties. And so when this was passed, they were very successful at persuading the people out there who voted how this would actually stop the increases, like it would make it level the increases in their property taxes, which in reality it stifled it. It stifled. And what it did is it shifted the tax burden to the homeowners in the fire district areas. The homeowners in the area are the ones who are now having to pay for that loss of growth. We have to raise mill rates in order to keep up with inflation growth and so forth. With municipalities, it's different. So through state taxes that are collected around the state, the municipalities they get a share of that, and what they get is they get about a 25% base collection rate of all state taxes. They get about 20% of vehicle taxes. Municipalities get highway user revenues at about 27.5% tax rate, and they get state privilege tax at about 5.6%. Each tax classification has a set rate that the municipalities receive, and that's any incorporated area in the state. The only restriction on that is it must be used for municipal services. And so us as a special taxing district, we do not receive any of that tax revenue. Any of it. So
but yet we're still in that system, right? We work in that system, we work to those standards.
Yes.
But we don't get that kind of money.
We don't get that money.
Mm-hmm.
So if someone goes into Sun Lakes today and purchases anything from Sun Lakes, services, goods, whatever, and it's taxed, Chandler, Gilbert, those areas out here, they receive a portion of that to go to and they can use it for fire, EMS, police, and so forth. Same with Sun City West, same with Whitman, Tonopah, Buckeye Valley. How that really affects the citizens, though, is especially when someone drives through there or someone's visiting and they get hurt and they use our resources, it's the citizens who own the homes who are paying for those services.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Where if you go into the city of Phoenix, but you live in a fire district, and something happens, well, you're technically kind of still paying for that when you pay through state taxes.
Gotcha.
Because that's
Okay.
because the
That's where the
taxes.
money goes.
I think that's
Yeah,
that's
sure.
where the money goes, and so I think in order to be a true system, fire districts should be able to receive some of that funding.
Agreed.
That should be an option. We should be also collecting that revenue because those taxes are coming from the areas that we serve in, and our
Absolutely.
citizens are paying for that.
Absolutely.
You said the term mill rate a couple of times.
Yes.
Could you explain
Yeah,
that just
please.
for people that don't know?
Yeah. So
Like me.
when
Just to be clear, I do know what a mill rate is.
so our citizens the homeowners in our areas that we serve, they pay a rate that's based upon an assessed value. It's called a mill rate. So I believe it's a certain percentage per 1,000 of the value of the home,
Okay.
right? And so each fire district in the state can be different. So, for example, Buckeye Valley, they pay $3.25 per thousand.
Okay.
Sun City or North County, I believe they would be about I want to say 248, something like that.
Sure.
And that's not exact numbers. And South County is a little bit higher, like 268. But it's set by their boards, their fire boards.
Okay.
And the rate is determined not just by this is what we believe the rate should be, but it's determined by the funding that's needed to provide the services, which include facilities, which includes gas, it includes electricity, maintenance, wages, benefits, everything combined. That's how their mill rate is established. Because we're a special taxing district, we're a nonprofit. A mill rate is not created to make a profit.
Right.
The mill rate is set based upon just to provide the needed services that is determined by the fire board.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we take that mill rate is a percentage of the assessed property value.
Correct.
And they vote on the mill rate and it's capped at a certain number, right? Like we can't go above a certain percentage.
Correct.
And then with Prop 117, no matter how much that house went up in value last year, we only get 5% of that increase,
That is
right? So if that house
Mhm.
doubled in price and their property tax would, in a perfect world, we get double the mill rate, we're only getting a 5% increase,
Correct.
right?
Which is not keeping up with the cost of eggs, the cost of fuel, the cost of
Fire trucks.
trucks,
Which are,
wages, competitive wages, healthcare, everything it costs to make a district run efficiently to provide a service to the community.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, so that's the reason why we find ourselves where we are today.
Yeah, it's the reason why we're looking for a revenue source. That's the reality. The reality is we need a revenue source that is equal to what the municipalities get in terms of our fair share of taxes that are paid out. If we don't come up with a solution, the burden, it gets heavier and heavier on the homeowner. The state of Arizona, very supportive of business, right?
Sure.
And so it seems like every couple of years we legislators, they create ways to make it more desirable for business to come here. And one of the ways they do that is by lowering the tax rate to businesses or giving them tax breaks.
Sure.
So when you take away that revenue that would have been created through those businesses, the burden has to fall somewhere. The unfortunate reality today is for fire districts, the only way that loss of revenue can be accounted for is through putting the burden on the homeowner who pays the mill rate to fund their fire district.
And going back to what you were talking about, Matt, is I'd say a large percentage of the homeowner doesn't realize that.
Correct.
I'm going to throw the area I work in, Sun City West.
Mm-hmm.
There's specific areas that border Surprise, Peoria municipalities. They dial 911, they expect professional, fast response, and they want critical care paramedics to take care of their loved ones. Period. End of story. They don't know any difference. But in the future, moving forward, if this isn't adjusted, what's going to start to happen? Are we going to see less trained personnel? Are we going to see older apparatus? I mean, what's the outcome here, and how's that going to affect the community?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because this isn't something that is that we're just the first people seeing. This is something that across the country, is becoming an issue. You look at the big fires in LA, right? A large city and stuff like that. They had 27 apparatus out of service.
Wow.
That were sitting in a parking lot waiting to go because they were broken. They didn't have the money and the manpower to fix them at the time, right? Wow. You have devastating fires in LA. Let's just take the apparatus, for example. Let's take that and how that landscape has changed from, let's say, 2016 to now. You used to be able to buy, a fire engine, an engine company for $500,000. You order it, it gets there in a year, right? You change that and you look to where we are now in 2025, that apparatus is over doubled in price. It takes 2 to 4 years to get here. And everybody's asking why. A lot of people like to blame it on, well, it's supply chain issues, it's labor shortages, it's from COVID. But there was recently a study, and it's actually made it all the way to the Senate right now, about a monopolization in the fire industry about fire apparatus manufacturers. And when you look at these private equity firms like Rev Group, right? In 2018, Rev Group it's a sub of another private equity that bought out all the little private manufacturers, right? You look at E1, you look at KME and all these other places that were able to provide, low cost service, a high value type of truck, to the fire departments and stuff like that. They're bought out, and they're all put under this one group called Rev Group.
Oh.
Now, Rev Group in 2021 saw their profit shares from 4% and said, we're going to take it to 10, right? Because we control it. Well, one of the things that they did, because this is now under a private equity firm and they're all about that bottom dollar,
Right.
is now all of a sudden they're controlling everything that you're going to source for a fire truck, such as chassis. They control 90% of them, such as the steel that it takes to get there. And part of their profit, I guess you can say margin stuff that they talk to their shareholders about is, hey, these delayed times are actually good for us, because they're charging $70,000, $80,000, $90,000 from the time that you sign the contract to build your apparatus to the time you take delivery. And it's already doubled in price. They want to they have pretty much centralized control of fire apparatus. They can set the price, especially when Spartan chassis are the ones that everybody uses. That's 90%, and so they can really control how much is being put out by everybody. There's only a few manufacturers left that aren't under Rev Group, Rosenbauer being one of them, but Rev Group also controls the chassis that go to everybody, the steel that's manufactured by it, and stuff like that. So they're controlling the supply chain, they're controlling all of that. And so they're setting the price. It is essentially monopoly. And the way I understand it right now is there's some antitrust laws that they believe are being violated, that it's being looked at Senate right now. And when we look at that, and how does that affect us down the line, you look at fire apparatus. When we start building our capital budgets that we say, hey, in 4 years, we're going to put aside $600,000, $700,000 for a custom-made Rosenbauer engine company, right? By the time that time frame comes and we're going to order that engine or that apparatus,
You're way behind.
It is doubled in price. And so now we're going, well, now we can't order 2 that we've budgeted for.
Sure.
We can only order 1. Right. And when these engine companies or these apparatus mile out at certain mileage and stuff like that, everything starts breaking and becoming far more expensive, less reliable. Now we have a big problem. So Rev Group essentially is controlling the supply chain. They're controlling everything, and they're actually making a profit on delaying it. And when you look at some of these reports that have gone to Senate, where it actually talks about, them bragging to their shareholders, hey, we're at now a 8.5% profit margin because we can actually delay this delivery to the fire departments and charge even greater fees. It's out of control. And so when you look at how that affects the end user for us, you have catastrophic type of consequences. We can't budget for all the apparatus that we need to replace.
Yeah.
The older apparatus become the ones that are frontline that you're having to repair all the time, which you're spending a far greater amount of money repairing it, and it's less reliable because it has 150, 200,000 miles on it.
Yeah.
And yet we're promising service delivery that we're going to be here and we're going to, you're going to get 4 brain surgeons in a fire truck in under, so many minutes to fix any problem that you have. And that's a promise we make to the public. Yet, the people that we're sourcing them through, we have zero control in any of that game. And it's not just apparatus. When you look at the cost of goods and inflation and how everything's gone up, just in my division alone in EMS, heart monitors, right? Heart monitors we used to be able to get for about $24,000. The cost of them now is over doubled for heart monitors.
It's $50,000 for a lifetime.
It's $50,000 if you're getting a smoking deal.
That is wild.
And so, and with that, we hire the best and the brightest people.
Yeah.
We really do, and people that are compassionate about delivering customer service and caring for the people that we're sworn to protect. And so we train them to this very high level, and we have an expectation level of performance that is just extraordinary, right? But we have the people that do it. But now it's our job sorry, I don't mean to hit my mic. It's our job, as chief officers within the organization to make sure that we're providing them with the right tools to do it. And if we're training them to this level, but we can only afford the tools right here.
Yeah.
What are we saying to our people? What are we saying to our communities that we're trying to provide? We're trying to provide the highest level of service when, hey, really, we can do this here, but we just don't have the money. It's like this. If you had if there's a medication out there, right, that will fix you, whatever's wrong with you, this is going to fix you. And if you get that medication because you live in, let's say, Chandler or Surprise or something like that, it's readily available to you. You get it for free, right? But if you live on this side of the border and you live in Sun Lakes, you live in Sun City West or something like that, we can't give this medication to you because we can't afford it, right? And so you're not getting the level of service that you could get because of the cost of the good, right? And so we're doing everything we can. And like I said, we're creating alternate revenue pathways for fire districts and stuff like that. But it's not enough. When you look at heart monitors, you're talking, $20,000, $25,000, a jump to $50,000. When you're looking at apparatus, you're talking $500,000 to a couple million now. And that becomes a huge problem. And what we don't want to do ever is drop our level of service delivery to the community.
Yeah.
That is something that I think we can all agree here that
Absolutely.
we're completely passionate
Absolutely.
about, is delivering that highest level of service to the people that we promised to do it to. And so we've got to find that solution in here. And I think our esteemed colleague right here, Captain Padilla,
Got one for us.
has some great ideas and things that we're going to see in the future, especially working together with all the fire districts, working with other municipalities and other working groups, creating partnerships and everything else, that legislatively we can change some of these things that we can hopefully fix in the future. Or at least for us here at AFMA, there's some things some actions that we're taking right now, because we don't want to see that drop in level of service or delivery or anything like that. We've promised our citizens that we're going to give them the highest level. They expect the highest level, and that's something we're going to continue to do.
That's amazing.
Great to hear.
It
From
really
the
is.
other side of the table, right? Like out in the field, I'm definitely proud of the fact that we haven't lowered standards. And we have tightened the belt, and we have absorbed hits over the last 5 years as with COVID and supply chain issues, and things got more expensive. But hearing you guys talk about it, we can only absorb so much.
Yeah,
If funding doesn't get fixed, there's going to be a time where, hey, it just is what it is, and we can't, like you said, we can't afford that piece of equipment, and that's heartbreaking
It
to
is.
think about when you put it in that medicine analogy, to be like,
Sure.
I don't have the tool to help you because the money didn't get funneled to us the way it should have, as a person whose job it is to just help people, right? Like, and you guys facilitate us helping people, and that is awful.
Yeah,
That's an
and
awful
when
thing to
we
think
look
about.
at what we do every day, right? You guys go out there in the streets and you deliver service. Seconds matter in lives,
Yeah.
right? All of that. And what we're trying to do is keep that standard up here. Every second counts, and for us, throughout the organization for the past few years, it's been every dollar counts. And we're doing the max amount that we possibly can with the least amount of money.
Yeah.
But we're coming up to that crossroads to where if we don't make some changes soon, we're going to see some differences in service delivery. And that's not something that, our communities want to see. That's not something that we want to see delivering that service to communities. We want to continue that exceptional service delivery. And there's ways that we think that we can do it, and I think Captain Padilla is going to talk about some of those.
Well, so let's talk about what we've done, right?
Absolutely.
So what we've done for citizens is like the creation of the authority. The creation of the authority was not to create an authority that people say, look, this is they're going to be the biggest and best authority, and they're going to provide the best fire service in the the whole state. Is that what we want? Yeah.
Sure.
But the reality for the creation of the authority is to make up for the shortfalls in revenue. No matter if you were Sun City West, Sun Lakes, Whitman, Tonopah, Buckeye Valley, is the financial crisis that had hit each district. If we were all still separate, it would be a hard thing to overcome. Would each district still be there? Yes. Each district, their tax rates would be probably as high as you can get.
Mm-hmm.
Districts would be looking at staffing. Districts would be looking at service cuts. The creation of the authority was to create a sustainable system that created security, that created a shared revenue services, shared resources services that would hold up the standard of service that is not only required, but it's also expected by the citizens. That's the biggest thing that we've done, and the reason for the creation of the authority is to provide the best service for our citizens. But it's not a final fix because of the revenue, obviously because of the revenue. On the labor side, one of the things that we're really pushing is we're working in conjunction with the PFFA, right? The PFFA is the state authority for labor. They do all of the lobbying and political action on behalf of all union firefighters across the state. It's twofold. So they're working at their level to address legislation to make changes in regards to keep ways to get revenue. At the local level, at our level, what we're doing is we've actually started meeting with our county board of supervisors. Our thought process is this: in an unincorporated Maricopa County, so places that do not have municipalities that are not incorporated, the county normally provides majority of the services. In the county charters and bylaws, it states that they can do IGAs with fire districts in order to address wildland or wildfires, wildland firefighters, stuff like that. But there's nothing in there that states that they can do IGAs or address EMS or fire service. Our hope is that we can create that we can work with the county to say, hey, look, we're providing the services in unincorporated areas. These are the citizens that you serve. They're the one who who voted you in, who are expecting this level of service. They expect to know if they call 911, they're going to get the fire truck, they're going to get the ambulance. And so we're working to create a relationship with them to show that what's needed, why it's needed, and create a revenue source that way. At the hurdle there is, how do we change the charters or bylaws for the counties, right? So this is where the PFFA gets involved at the legislative level to get legislators to vote, to put a bill and have it voted through that will allow these changes. So we could possibly work with the counties in each district, in each county would have the opportunity to work and create a system. That's one of the ways that we can help create a revenue source. And this will take the burden or lessen the burden on those homeowners specifically in those areas. Because the reality is too, is we service areas outside of our fire districts.
Sure.
The perfect example, it comes up, Whispering Ranch.
Absolutely.
The nearest station is 106.
Mm-hmm.
So every time they go out there for a fire, EMS or anything they run to, the reality is the cost is on the homeowner. So if we can get the county to recognize that and say, hey, here's an agreement, you guys provide services, here's some revenue for doing so, that's a way to do it. Another way to do it is, like I mentioned before, is allow us to share in the taxes that are collected statewide. That's an additional way to do it.
Yeah.
The unfortunate part of this is it has to go through the state, right? Through legislators.
Sure.
And trying to get them to move is hard, because if you walk down the street and you ask anybody anywhere, are you okay with me raising your taxes?
For sure.
The answer is no. So how do we do this? We educate. So currently, Local 3573, we kind of took the lead on it. We're creating a landing page, we're working with all districts across the state to create a landing page that says like #Arizona Fire District Funding Crisis. Someone clicks on it, it leads them there, and it educates and outlines what the shortfalls are, like what needs to be addressed. We actually got an email last week from the PFFA. Ben Roche sent it on behalf of the PFFA. He's the kind of liaison for fire districts in the state. The PFFA is now also going to be doing the same thing to start educating the public, so we can hopefully make some moves in the future. So at this point, we're going to be working with the PFFA to create this site. And these are some of the ways that we're going to start educating the public.
So steps are in motion.
Yeah, steps are in
This is
motion.
awesome.
We're moving forward. We can't rely on what we're doing currently. We can continue to create a bigger and bigger authority, and it buys you time. It's not the solution.
Mm-hmm.
The solution's a revenue source. And then buying time, how else, like what are other ways we can kind of, fix a shortfall, which leads us to the bond initiative.
Okay.
North County and South County, both fire districts, they agreed to do a bond initiative that will address capital needs in each district.
Okay.
But that's, I guess people need to understand that's not the fix.
For sure.
Right.
That's just a Band-Aid, because eventually bond money runs out too. And the reality is, if you look at the bond on how it's funded, the funding's still on the homeowners.
Yeah,
in the
of course.
district.
Of course. So those proposed bonds or props.
Yep.
Those will be put into play on the ballot in the fall, correct?
That's correct. That's Prop 407 and 408.
Okay.
They will affect North County and South County.
What would the average, if those pass, and I mean, we're here to educate the public, what would that look like for the average homeowner if those pass?
Do you want to address this? Want me to do it?
Go ahead.
So it's hard to say financially like if you're looking at the financial aspect,
Sure.
what it will hit the homeowner. So when the mailers go out and the bond initiatives go out, they'll actually be in the language. There will be it'll show the rates at
Okay.
the financial rate. So
Okay.
each homeowner will have the opportunity, each voter will have the opportunity to look at it. The reason I say it's hard to address because if you do a bond, and let's just say for discussion purposes
Sure.
here, we do a $50 million bond,
Okay.
right? You don't sell $50 million at one time and say, this is what we're using. The way the bonds are created, they're created to address capital needs. So these bonds will not go to wages, benefits, anything like that for either district. It'll go to address capital needs such as buildings, maintenance, fire apparatus, SCBA's, masks. It'll address all those hard
For sure.
products that we need, and so it'll be taken out over time as each project goes along, and so the rate of what's paid back is based upon the actual usage. So it'll vary as it goes along. But once the bonds end, the revenues end, you're right back to the same
place.
position that you started with.
Sure.
So it's just a Band-Aid.
Yeah. Well, I think that's also important for the public to understand is that these facilities
Mhm.
that are our homes for us 2 days at
Yeah.
a time, right? Again, they expect a high level of response. They expect specific things when they engage the emergency services system, right? That's hard if you're at a station that the air conditioning barely works and you can't sleep and you're up all night running calls, or you don't have specific water, or it's infested with all the things that people think when you're homeowners. It is no different at a fire station, right? And you can only do so much with what you have. So something like that to maintain the facilities, to make sure that it's a tool we have in our toolbox still to be able to service the community. So that's very important.
Yeah, and then if you look at buildings, right? And so you have to look at your buildings and say, is this building here, the year, the age, the use of it, are you better off doing maintenance on it every year, or are you better off like building a different building, right? The cost of repairs, like annually, like you're looking $50,000, $70,000 a year savings annually on maintenance for facilities and buildings that are newer than older, right? And then on the labor side, like how it's important to us, let's look at the health aspect of it.
Sure.
So if you follow stuff that happens around the country, right? And even in this state, we'll take cancer. There have been fire stations that people look at and say, why does this station have a huge cancer rate compared to others, right? And so several fire departments around this state as well have went in and shut down fire stations for the health aspect of it, because the stations were so old. They were built with different building codes back then. They have asbestos still in them.
Sure.
Are over the years, they have mold and stuff like that. And the rate of sickness to those firefighters is crazy.
Absolutely.
And so the need to build a new station, and not only to provide better service and outcome for citizens, but to allow a fire member, one of our guys, to retire and actually enjoy a retirement, like
Sure.
that needs to be addressed.
Absolutely.
And that has to be addressed. And this bond will help help us with those types of issues. It's not the reason, like the specific reason for the bond, but it's one of the reasons as labor that we look at is the health, wellness, also mental health of our members, right?
Absolutely.
You put somebody for 10, 15 years in a building that's, 40, 50 years old, and it's not adequate, as you're stating, get up how many times a night when they're at the station. Does the station cool down enough? Does the appliances work? Does the doors work?
Yeah.
When stuff doesn't work correctly, how do we react as humans?
It's a domino effect, man. It's a mental game. You have your 4 days off, right? Well, you're giggling. I know you're giggling. Just, I mean,
4 days off.
Well, my station was built in 1982. But it's a great station. I'm just saying, it's the thing that at that mental game, you start to dread, like, oh, I've got to go to work now, and am I going to have to deal with, like, I know I'm going to run all these calls, and then I'm not going to be able to get into bed because it's going to be hot or cold, or I have to worry about ants. Anything you could think of.
Yep.
The little creature comforts that make you want to perform better, that takes a mental toll on somebody.
And it benefits the citizens
Absolutely.
who work on it. So if you got a guy who is just worn out, mental fatigue, physical fatigue, because of a station or a fire truck they're on that's not functioning correctly, how does it affect the service that we give? I'll give a perfect example. Several years ago, the truck's no longer in service at Station 103. Station 103, the bays, the coolers didn't work in the bay. It's 115 degrees for a week straight. The shoreline AC did not work in the fire truck. The first thing that probably people think of is, they're crying because they don't have AC. Their truck's doesn't have AC running when they're not in it. No, what happened is this. We went out to the truck to do the checkoffs or to pull out the equipment, turn on the equipment, and they said error.
Overheated.
Because it's so hot.
It was so hot, the equipment did not work. So we had to take the electrical equipment out of the truck, put it in the station to cool down. So imagine if we didn't do that. And then a 911 call kicked out, and it was for a cardiac event. And we show up with equipment to our citizens that would not turn on. You couldn't use it. How are we supposed to provide life-saving services to that member? And we won't go down the domino effect of how they're going to react.
Absolutely.
We're just saying these are the things that, because of a lack of revenue, that makes it hard for us to address. Because in order to create a capital account, we either two things. We either increase the mill rate, what the homeowner pays, or we cut funding to other places in the budget. That's the only way we create the capital revenue. And so this bond is a Band-Aid to say, hey, for now, until we can find additional revenue sources and make state get angry. We got to make this state get off their ass and realize like the dangers you're putting people in by not creating revenue sources. And we're not saying give us the world.
No.
Give us the means to function at an adequate level, right? That's what we want to do.
Absolutely.
And that's what these bonds will do, is they'll help us create that Band-Aid to get there.
Yeah.
So I wanted to go back to one of the things that Johnny talked about here when we talked about with capital funding, right?
Okay.
In buildings. You guys talked about how your fire station was built in the 80s, right?
1982, sir.
When you look at how stations and things were built in the 80s, which was a long time ago, it's 40-something years ago, versus now, it's like 45 years. 44 years?
43.
43 years?
43.
I was
the same year you were
I was a
born.
sophomore
Shut
in high school.
up, man. Stop it.
That's when you were
You weren't even,
born.
I don't even know if
4
your
years
parents
old.
were alive in 1980.
My parents hadn't even met in
You were even a
1982.
thought.
You were 4 years old.
That was 4 years old. 1983, yeah.
I was a sophomore in
Johnny was
high
in high
school.
school.
I was 3 years old. I was 3. Wow, man.
But all right, when you look at how buildings are built back then, far different than we're built now, right?
Sure.
And we're living in them 24 hours a day. A lot of people, when they, in their houses that they have right now, they clock out of the house to go to school, to go to work. It's not lived in for 8 hours and everything else. Whereas we have a lot of people that are in and out of this building 24 hours a day constantly.
Yep.
Constantly living there. These buildings get beat up, and they were just built different back in the day. When you look at some of the fire stations that are built now by some of these companies like Core and not to plug Core or anything, but some of these buildings are built with massive efficiencies,
Sure.
right? Which are a huge cost savings to the taxpayers. They're built with efficiencies not only in energy price and stuff like that, but efficiencies like cancer reduction.
Yeah.
When we look at some of these things, when you take your turnouts off, right? When I worked in Tempe, I worked at Fire Station 2 for almost my entire career, and that was built in '73. When you took your turnouts off, you put it into a locker that was sat there right in the bay that was right next to the exhaust from the engine, and so when it turned on, when it turned off, when it pulled in, pulled out, the entire bottom part of the locker was black from diesel exhaust, right? Carcinogen.
Mm-hmm.
Puts it right into all of your gear. When you look at how they're built now, there's decontamination rooms, there's hot zones, cold zones, warm zones. There's places that you take your gear that are nowhere close to your living quarters, which reduces your exposure. And when we're talking about reducing exposure, we're talking about your membership, right? You're talking about them being able to efficiently do their job. You're talking about their families. This has a thing that goes all the way down the line, and it saves money on the taxpayers, because when you get a cancer claim as a firefighter on the job, that's workman's comp. That is paid for, under workman's comp by the state, by taxpayers' money. But by building some of these facilities that have these incredible efficiencies inside of it, not only are we helping our membership, we're saving money on building costs, we're saving money on energy efficiency, we're saving money all over the place. And by putting a new building up, because just like Captain Padilla said, hey, you can do it a couple ways. We can either spend the maintenance or put a new building. But I really like the way that some of these new buildings are built.
Absolutely.
The efficiencies in them, the safety that's built in them for us, for our people, for you guys, is incredible, right? And when you look at the cancer claims that we have just here in the state of Arizona, it's through the roof. It's absolutely heartbreaking.
Yeah.
I know that we have a lot of members experiencing that right now. We have members that have gone through it.
Absolutely. Close friends
that have passed away.
Yeah.
And stuff like that as well. And
I think that's a great point, Chief. The community needs to realize that we are human beings.
We are.
We have daughters. We have sons. We have wives, brothers. We have the same thing everybody else has.
Yeah.
And we deserve that.
100%. We've taken an oath that in the line of duty, we're willing to give our lives to protect the public.
Yeah.
But what we're taking on and stuff like that, we understand that risk, but we want to minimize it as much as possible, and we are human. And if we can minimize that by using some of these capital funds to redefine efficiencies in fire stations, or, build in some of these efficiencies in fire stations, or rebuild some of the fire stations that were built a long time ago that don't have them, and reduce that danger to some of our members. I mean, that it goes beyond words,
Absolutely.
with the community, with us in itself. I mean, we're sworn to protect the public, which is what we'll do, with our lives and everything else. But, this is something that we want, especially as chief officers and as union, is to protect our members as much as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So getting back to the props, that will be voted on in November.
Correct.
Okay. So we had spoken on what the funds could be used for in the current climate we're in, crisis, whatever we want to call it. And I mean, I don't want to use the word what can you predict, but if those props don't pass, where does that leave districts until hopefully the alternate funding comes into play down the road, which I could assume at the state level, Captain Padilla, it's not something that just happens overnight.
Correct. It doesn't happen overnight. We've been working on this for years, right? Those before me in labor have worked on it. Those before them in labor have worked on it. The state doesn't move quickly, especially when it comes to creating taxes. If the bonds don't pass, then we'll have to readjust, right? So readjusting means, in simple terms, that our fire boards will have to take a closer look at their duties by legislation.
Sure.
And their duties by legislation is to create a balanced funding resource so their districts can operate. So they'll have to make the distinction of at what level do they want to operate at. Because like I said previously, we get a lump sum of money. This is all we get.
Yep.
We can't pull from Parks and Rec. We can't pull from street services. We get what we get. So then the decision by the board will have to be, how do we allocate those funds? If we get to a point where we just don't have enough funding, like I said, first they have to raise the rates. If they decide not to do that, where do we cut?
Mm-hmm.
The reality is the biggest cost for any fire district and any fire department here in the state are the members,
Sure.
are the people, are the boots on the ground that are providing the services. So how do we cut that? That's the decision that will have to be made. Do they shut down stations? Do they take trucks down to
Sure.
smaller staffing? But there's things that have to be addressed if you look at that. So part of our agreement in order to be on automatic aid is we have to staff at a certain level, right?
Yeah.
And that level is 4-man staffing. We do have the ability at times when absolutely necessary to go down to 3-person staffing.
Sure.
That's only for a set amount of hours.
Sure.
I believe it's 8 hours.
Yep.
What does that cause? That causes inefficiency in the system. That causes inefficiency in the services we provide those citizens. We have a set number of ambulances in each area. A lot of people who are just not educated, especially if they move here from other areas or whatnot, they don't understand that the ambulances are not the ones who solely provide medical services. That's what we do on the fire truck as well. And one of the reasons for example, we'll take Sun City West, for example.
Sure.
We have Medic 101, Medic 102, Medic 103. You guys can attest to how many times are all 3 ambulances either at the hospital, on a call, or transporting at one time?
At least
All the time.
3 or 4 times, 48-hour shift. We're
So
calling a different.
It's all the time. So if those resources are not available, and people think that that's who should run, just the ambos, like, where do you get your services from? Well, it's from the fire truck. It's from the firefighters. We're dual role. This is why we have paramedics and EMTs on every fire truck. We provide first contact, initial service to all the citizens. And if those ambulances aren't there because they think, well, we'll just focus on that. No, you need the fire truck. Now, if you're down to 3 people on a truck, the level of service that's given to either a major trauma or a cardiac event,
Sure.
that declines.
Absolutely.
You need 4 people on the truck in order to provide adequate EMS service. If we get to a point where a fire board says, hey, we're going to shut down a station, what does that create? That creates a gap in service. That's less units to respond, even in an automatic aid system, and that increases the time to get there.
Absolutely.
Chief Al's, he can answer it better, but time matters.
Yeah.
Time matters. If time to a house fire, if there's somebody in the house, the sooner we get there, the higher probability we can save someone. Time to a cardiac event. The amount of time that passes if someone goes into cardiac arrest and they're not getting sufficient, even a bystander doing CPR, if it's not sufficient or efficient, that matters. That's
Absolutely.
life and death.
Mm-hmm.
That's life and death. And so we will, if the bonds do not pass, we will eventually get to that point where these decisions will have to be made.
Yeah. and I don't want to be like doom and gloom, but I think the community needs to realize and understand. I want to go really quick back to what you'd said about the budget we get, right? Here's the set amount of money you get. With the municipalities, if there's a shortfall, they can rob Peter to pay Paul. They could pull Parks and Rec. You name it, they could get an extra $20 million. Snap of the finger, talk to the city council, get their money. We do not have that luxury. So with that, like you had said, manning down trucks, I believe personally, and correct me if I'm wrong, that can extend a lot farther. Because let's say I'm a 20-year-old young man, young woman, doesn't matter. I want to get into the fire service. I'm looking for a place to land. I want to become a professional firefighter. Am I going to go to the place that gives me the resources to be successful? The place that invests in cancer prevention, gives me the pay and benefits to support my family so I could get through a 25-year career and retire and enjoy life? Or am I going to go to the place where I have to struggle, not get proper turnouts, not have the things that I need to do the job correctly? So ultimately, the community loses because you're going to get those heavier response times. You're going to get potentially personnel that are not trained correctly. And I got to be here to tell you, I don't want that situation if my family member's life is on the line.
Yeah. And Chris, to back that up more to what you and Captain Padilla are saying, to put it into numbers, we have a 50% survival score that's given to us by the state. They measure everything that we do on medical calls with cardiac and cerebral emergencies, right? We have a 50% survival score, which is one of the highest in the state, which tells you the level of service that we're actually providing, right? Now, when you look at the population demographics that we serve, the baby boomers right now are getting older and older, which is why you're seeing call volume go through the roof, right? It's going through the roof, but yet funding, because of inflation and everything else, is dwindling. And so that's where we're starting to see, hey, we have to make some changes soon, because right now we're able to get units to community members, within that 5 minutes to sit there and stop the tissue death in a cardiac call, or the brain death in from a cerebral type of call in a stroke emergency, because we have the availability to put 6 highly trained people on this right now that know what they're doing, that can provide that highest level of care. And we're seeing it. The data proves what we're doing right now is absolutely accurate. It is 100% on the ball with what we're doing. Now, we don't want to see that ever drop. Like I said, we have a sworn duty and obligation to the community we serve that we're going to give them the highest level. But when we start having to close fire stations, we can't put up more ambulances or fire trucks in high volume areas, we start seeing that mortality and that morbidity rate climb and that survivability drop, right? And that is not what we signed up for. That is not the purpose of why we serve our communities.
Absolutely.
And so all of this has a detrimental effect. It is all, cyclical, and how we can fix this in the level that we can provide to the community.
Yeah. And again, I'll go back to it. The bottom line is money.
Yeah. One of the things that has happened over the last several years is this. So we have fire boards who are voted in by their constituents, right?
Sure.
They're responsible for the fiscal outcome of these districts. In the past, I can say this is my observation.
Sure.
In the past, the relationships between labor, management, and the fire board, it's not that they were bad or wrong. It's just, I think we were all on different pages.
Okay.
Right? And different pages, meaning like laborers thought we should focus here, management focused here, the board focused here. In the last several years, we've been able to actually create a better working relationship with management and with the fire board. And to find out, for my end on labor, I wanted to find out what was management's goal and what their thought process was on where the authority was going, right? I met with board members, same thing. Like, what's your vision? What do you think the authority should be doing? So forth. The reality is we all have the same vision and goals for the authority. We all have the same concern. And all our concerns were this, is eventually we're going to run out of funding, and how do we address capital? Like, that was the major concern.
Sure.
We have a lot of board members that they're very educated, especially in fire and EMS, and very educated with the citizens we serve, of our aging group of citizens, right? Because our two biggest areas are retirement areas. And so we were able to sit down and discuss what are our options, like what are viable options. When the bond discussion came up, we had to address like what were the negative effects it would have on citizens, what are the positive effects, right?
Sure.
And you had to sit there as groups and decide which one outweighs which the most, right?
Yeah.
We came to the consensus that this is the viable option. The thing that's very unique with the bond is the board doesn't vote to pass a bond. The board, what they voted on was to allow the citizens to decide the level of service that they're going to get in the future.
Sure.
So truly, this bond is a question to all the citizens we serve, is what do you want?
Yeah.
Do you want to continue the service you're receiving, or do we want to address what might be coming down the pipeline if this bond does not pass?
Sure.
And so our function here as an authority is to educate them.
Yeah.
Is to educate them as, why did this come up? How did this come up? How it benefits you, like, and truly why it's needed.
Mm-hmm.
Why this is truly needed, and how we got here. And that how we got here is everything we spoke about. Prop 117, the failure of Prop 310, the lack of funding and resources. We always put out for grants. The authority does very, very well, and they're very progressive on addressing grants that are available. They're addressing revenue options. This is being worked on all the way up to the federal level. The other day, I just received notice. We were kind of talking about it offline here a little bit. Senator Gallego has introduced a bipartisan bill that's called the Special District Fairness and Accessibility Act.
Mm-hmm.
In short, I hope people that are listening look it up and get the information. And if they support it, please send letters of support to your senator. But what this would do is this would recognize special taxing districts like we are, like fire districts. And this would allow us to have a more streamlined accessibility to fundings and grants that would help our district. But the thing to remember, that I want everybody to remember, is funding, like grant funding and stuff like that. Those are special. Those are one-time deals.
Sure.
Sometimes.
Sure.
It's not part of your ongoing revenue. So the main focus is of that is to create additional revenue source, right? And to use this bond to hopefully the citizens see the need for it to move forward with this bond to help us continue what we're doing, especially on the union side, and that's to address legislative change both at the state, county, and federal levels.
Okay.
Oh, I appreciate you guys having us on here. I mean, this is information that I don't think the general public truly knows. Things that Captain Padilla and the rest of the command staff that we're working on, that we've been working on for years, and solutions that we think are going to help sustain this organization well into the future.
Absolutely.
You know, and not only just sustain it, but sustain the operating level for the service that we provide to the community. You know, and that, if you ask just about any firefighter out there, is their number one goal. Hey, besides making it home safe tomorrow, is being able to provide that top level of service to the community. It's why we all signed up to be firefighters. It's why we all wanted to do it ever since we were a little kid, was to be that person in need. You know, when you call, we want to be the one to fix a problem. We want to be the one to save your life. And we've worked extremely hard to be educated, trained, and everything else to be able to do that. And we're asking for the public's help in allowing us to keep doing that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we didn't. I don't know any firefighter, any paramedic, any EMS personnel. I don't know anybody in the fire service who elected to do this job. They chose to do this job, and they didn't choose it to do half-ass. I don't know.
And we sure didn't do it to get rich.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't
sure.
know of any board member that sits on the board, anybody in management that said, we're going to come in there and give you half-ass work. I don't know any citizen that calls 911 and says, give me a half-ass service.
Yeah.
I don't see it. And
We take great pride in what we do every day.
And so when it was decided that let's ask the citizens to consider a bond, there was a lot of thought put into this. There was a lot of minds going back and forth and saying, are we at that point? And the unfortunate answer is yes. That's the unfortunate answer, is we're at that point. It's time that, to do a bond initiative.
Absolutely.
This way we can continue to give the service that's not only expected, but that's required.
So thank you, gentlemen, again for being here. We appreciate your time. This is it's a crisis. I will tell you, as like you gentlemen were talking about boots on the ground and people in the field, how absolutely proud I am to be a part of this organization, to have leaders like yourselves leading us and looking out for our best interests, and understanding, like, hey, money makes the world go round, and it is a fact. And unfortunately, with as expensive as the world's getting these days, we're just not getting the revenue to support what we want to bring to the community. So this is an educational tool we're using for the community. It is an ask. In the fall, November, Prop 407, 408, to allow us to get the time we need to get to that state level and find that alternate revenue source so we can continue to provide the service that everybody deserves.
It's been the greatest honor and privilege to not only serve the community, but the members.
I don't know how else to say. The support is needed.
Yeah,
the support is needed. If the bond passes, which the support is truly needed, this is not going to take away from, especially the labor aspect of saying, okay, we're good for 20 years.
Yeah.
This is just, like I said, a Band-Aid. We're going to continue to fight.
Sure.
We're going to continue to support our citizens and our members and keep addressing the shortcomings. Like I said before, we're doing it currently. We're meeting with county level, state, federal level, and that's not going to stop. That's not going to stop. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, with that, thank you guys for taking time out of your day. Thank you for watching, everyone. 360 Podcast. Don't forget to like and follow.
There you go.
He hates when I do that.